here to do the Lun MEGA wheel review. I just took a photo and I sent it to the marketing department of Winspace and I was like, can you tell me what's going on here? That was all I said. Not only one of the most common yaw angles that I get when I'm out riding, but one of the lowest drag. Winspace is the parent brand of Lun. They've been an OEM for about 10 plus years. They're based in the Chinese carbon wheel capital of the world, which is Xiamen. They've been pretty instrumental in their business development and marketing, really going after that sort of Western marketing approach since about 2019. And they've had a hugely successful run of products in the Hyper Gen 1 and Gen 2. Now the Gen 2 was a kind of just a small update on the Gen 1 because the Gen 1 was so good. And it really came across to me at the time like, wow, you know, I've been buying off D2C, like direct to consumer brands in China like Fast Sports and Light Bicycle, but this is the first brand that really came along that offered something completely original. Original thinking, original design. You know, they had their own rim, their own hub, and the completely proprietary spoke system at the time, which I believe they had under license on a patent. This is a Chinese brand that really know what they're doing. Anyway, over the years, I've tested the Gen 1 disc and rim wheels. I've tested the Gen 2 Hypers, the D45, the D67 disc, and the D67 SE, which I'm actually riding now. Today, Lun's new kind of skunk works project, I guess. Another completely novel system of, you know, hub geometry and hub construction. Original products, not just copycat stuff, which is really cool. Now, a quick summary before we start. This is going to be largely a comparison to the D45 Gen 2 because the rim is exactly the same. So the rim on the Mega is exactly the same. I've used the D67 for pretty much the whole of the last kind of road TT season. I had no issues with it whatsoever. It's been absolutely faultless. Now the price, like I said, the Skunk Works. What is Skunk Works? Well, Skunk Works is like the AMG, the M division, actually probably a bit more kind of niche than that. What can we do in R&D and try and get it to consumer kind of project? It is quite expensive. It's 2,600 USD. Let's just not make no bones about that. It's quite expensive before we get to the discount code, which there will be because in general I think this is a pretty good wheel set. And it's only 50 grams lighter than the D45. So if you've got the D45, which is a good wheel set, as you've seen all the reviews on my channel before, links down below, is it really worth upgrading for 50 grams? But are you getting anything extra? Is it better than just lightweighting? Is there any other really cool benefits to this wacky kind of proprietary hub system? Insane stiffness, I just want to mention in this quick summary. The stiffness out of plane laterally and in torsion is absolutely insane. And that has drawbacks as well, and we'll come to those. Like the negatives, like I said, from the D45s and the D67s, for a lot of riding, if it's not racing or TTs, for me it's too stiff. Apart from that, I think the Gen 2 Hypers are almost perfect. Testing, this actually should say 4 months of testing, well actually nearly 5 because I started this PowerPoint ages ago. All in the UK, kind of end of summer into autumn, all weathers, a lot of rain. It's been very, very, very wet this year. Done the stiffness test versus all the previous wheels as you'll see, and also I did the aero test versus the CRW wheels. Now the CRW is a very interesting one because that's really in this price bracket too. It's above 2,000 USD and it's kind of a direct rival. It's something very special, not mimicked by Western brands. Is this still a beta or not? Well, if I see something on the Global Cycling Network, whether it's GCN or GMBM, like a paid editorial, I'm sorry, but that's a released product. And something got me a little bit hot under the collar in this wheel test, and we'll come to that in a bit. Now, the construction, let's quickly get through all the boring stuff. It's got front and rear specific rim profiles, just like the D45. So you've got a 46 on the front and a 54, slightly deeper one, on the back. They are a bit more V-shaped than most kind of fat bulbous rims, but they're still 21 millimeters internal, so bang on the trend there. Carbon spokes, now these end are pretty much the same as what we normally get on the Hypers. It's at this end where things get interesting, but we'll talk about that in a minute. 17 millimeter anodized axles, which are really good. Anodized axles, they need to be anodized, and I've always said that in my hub reviews. They've got high preload, like you can tell when you get them out of the box and you just do a free spin, they are quite draggy. So they've really gone for high stiffness and high preload, but when you clamp everything in the bike and all those little clearances are taken out, it spins beautifully. There is quite good weather sealing on the bearings, and it's a trade-off, isn't it? If you want them to be free spinning forever, you'd have no seals in your bearings, but they wouldn't last. Now, I'll drop in a clip here. You can already see, after some really wet rides, I've already got a little bit of rust on one of the bearings, so they're not perfect. And no more knurled end caps. Now, on the Gen 1 Hypers, they gave me knurled end caps on my hubs, and it just freaked me out because they just destroy your dropouts in the carbon frame. Not so bad in aluminium, but if you're getting the wheels in and out a lot, just can't have knurled end caps. The Halo spoke format. So this is a fully bonded spoke flange with integrated spokes. So from here all the way around up onto the other side is one long carbon strand, well, one long carbon spoke. and they're fully embedded and built in, and it's that built-in boundary condition that gives this wheel such high stiffness and such odd characteristics, as we'll come to. With those built-in end caps and those extra bolts that you can see here, that gives them like quite a few layers of redundancy, more so than like a lightweight Meilenstein or something like that. Immense lateral stiffness, like I said, high torsional stiffness, so in braking and accelerating, and it's this fixed boundary condition of these being like bonded in and stuck on, rather than just a spoke head, which is not fixed at all. So a spoke head, a normal spoke head, can twist. It has basically, to some extent, 4 or 5 of its degrees of freedom unlocked under high load, so it can actually move, and that all gives rise to flex. Now, I'm not going to debate whether spoke tension adds to wheel stiffness or not. The theory, Hooke's law, if it's perfect, says it shouldn't, but in theory it does, because the boundary conditions of the spokes change. Here, they absolutely do not. They are bonded or like built in or cantilevered in or fixed in, like a fixed in end. If you know anything about structural mechanics, you'll know what I'm talking about. But basically, these spoke heads cannot move. Up here, you can still have some small kind of minute swiveling or twisting. And that gives rise to absolutely no spoke resonance. And coupled with the fact that these are somewhat messily wrapped, they're tied together. So the free length of the spoke in resonance is much, much shorter. So like a guitar string, the resonant frequency is going to go up anyway. The fixed in boundary condition just makes it so stiff under torsion, braking loads, even in soaking wet conditions. This is the first wheel that I've ever ridden where in absolutely soaking, pissing wet conditions, you don't sound like a French horn going down a hill. I mean, if you've ever listened to a peloton or a race coming down a wet descent, it's just deafening, that cry of all the brakes squealing. A lot of the time, it's not just the brakes and the pads, it's the whole wheel system and fork going into resonance because the spokes are excited. Now you can hear how dull these sound when you pluck them, they don't even ring. And that's probably because the resonant frequency is so high, they just won't, you don't get that audible ring. There's just not a lot to get excited. Now, that sounds weird, but it's an engineering term. We can get excited about the fact that there's not a lot to get excited about. Anyway, I've done spectrum analysis on many other wheel reviews. So when I get a disc brake squeal, mostly, sometimes it's in the dry, it's on carbon spoke wheels. And I think a lot of the problem with carbon spoke wheels is they're so stiff, they don't have a lot of inherent stretch when they're under tension. So it's very easy for them to get detension and start to ring. Their resonant frequency can drop very, very quickly and they do start to ring. With these, I have not needed to do any spectrum analysis. And I've proved in other videos that wheels, that spokes are going into resonance by matching the resonant frequency with the spectrum analyzer to the sound of the brake squeal. On the very first ride is how silent they were in pissing wet conditions. On the same pads and discs, I would put another wheel on and just get it absolutely howling straight away. So whether Winspace have designed that as a feature, personally I don't think they have. And it's a function of how stiff they are, and I think it's just a really cool feature. Now, that was really, really nerdy and boring, wasn't it? So let's just get on to some more basic stiffness stuff. You've seen this graph before, it's getting pretty busy. I'm sorry if you can't read the text, but you might have to pause it and zoom in a bit. But the kind of dark grey bars here are the Megas, and you can see they're almost the stiffest wheels I've ever tested, beat only by the Fastsport Von 2s, which are insanely stiff because they've got very thick carbon spokes and they've got more carbon spokes than these. And the other one on there is the 88mm TT wheel that I built behind me. My special recipe, managed to get that very stiff. Horrendously stiff. I've always said though that a lot of these wheels are too stiff, these carbon spoke wheels are too stiff. For me to do 100k, I wouldn't choose these wheels. If you want to do 100k, you know, Mallorca on smooth roads, or if you live in places where you've got amazing, you know, roads to ride or smooth circuits, like if you ride Yas Marina kind of Grand Prix circuit on a Tuesday night or whatever, pick these wheels. But if you've got crap bumpy roads where you need some extra comfort from the wheel, I find with these, and I've always said this, I have to drop the tyre pressure. And if I'm dropping the tyre pressure so low just to get the comfort back, I'm actually penalising myself a little bit in rolling resistance. So too stiff can be a bad thing. Now this is where it gets a bit messy. This is the Aerodynamics, and this is the full database of wheels that I've been testing over the last year with the help of Aerolab, the pitot tube. Now this is getting quite busy. Anyway, let's quickly recap on what this is. So on the primary axis on the left, you've got the CDA of each lap. Each lap is 2k long, 1k out, 1k back. Every single lap and every single run I do on here, same clothing, same bike, same water bottle, same tyre pressures, same tyres, all the CRR is kept the same. All the conditions, the barometric conditions, so the weather are taken into account in the CDA calculation by the pitot tube. So it's as close to perfect as you can get outdoors. The only thing I can't change is the wind, the yaw angle. Now the yaw angle is plotted on the secondary axis down the right hand side, and those are represented by the dashed lines at the top, and you can see more or less it's between kind of 4 and 10 degrees. That typically tends to be the most popular yaw angles I get. And there's a CDA for each lap, and then it takes an average CDA after that. And you can see there's basically nothing to split the CRW and the Lun. But you might say, oh wow, these look way faster than any other wheels you tested. The blue line and the orange line were tested on the 11th of August. That was after my Alps trip when I came back about 2.5 to 3 kilos lighter. And I'm pretty sure this is just a frontal area decrease off my total CDA. So it is flattering to these wheels. And I could lie and just say, yeah, these pair of wheels are way faster than anything else. Personally, I think they are, but I think they're definitely helped by the fact that I lost a bit of weight. Even though I've kept my clothing the same, the bike setup the same, even the bottle on the bike is the same, I would need to go and test some other wheels. Now, while there are other wheels tested on that day, I just don't have time. Like, this was a weekend and it took me the whole part of a day to do these two wheels back to back. And then there's a load of faff of changing the tyres, changing the wheels, matching the pressures, riding them a bit, warming them up, matching the pressures again, driving to the test circuit, driving back. It's best part of the day gone, and I just haven't tested any others since then. Unfortunately, I think I've put on a bit of weight since the Alp trip now, and it's probably going to bump them back up. But I could lie to you, like I said, and just say they are the fastest, but those are the results, I'm not going to lie. We're looking at around, on this graph, between the next fastest one, which is the D67, 8 to 10 watts. Now that is, I would say, that's not the wheels. I'd say that's maybe a bit of the wheels, but majority is my body frontal area getting smaller. Take nothing away from the test. The CRW and the Luns are basically within a watt at 40 kilometers an hour. From starting the Aerolab sensor testing up until the present day, up until the latest test I've done, this is all the data points of all the laps, that as the lap number increases, the CDAs kind of squidge in a bit, the upper and lower bounds come together a bit. That goes to show that by the time lap 5, I'm not moving so much in my position. Perhaps there may be some other temperature settling going on with the sensor, maybe some temperature drift in the barometer or something. Now, is there convergence like this? The more laps you do, a line down and a line up from the bottom. I'm not sure, but don't forget, all of these laps are not for the same wheel. They're for all different wheels, but it does go to show that the kind of range as I do more laps does decrease a bit. So that's interesting. So I would never do less than 5 laps per run. And again, this CDA versus yaw thing, I've always had this suspicion that I seem to get the lowest CDAs of any wheels when the wind condition is between 4 and 6 degrees. And then I need more data points or a better analysis to look at this, but I do think there's this kind of inflection point around 5 degrees where it seems to be whatever wheels you're riding, that is the critical point that you're getting the lowest CDA, which is very interesting. And most of these points clustered here are actually the CRW and the Lun, and that's all the CRW and the Lun laps. So yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. Every time I add laps to the database, I check these graphs out, but I definitely think there is this trend where there's this inflection point around 5 degrees of yaw. So that seems to be not only one of the most common yaw angles that I get when I'm out riding, but one of the lowest drag. Apart from doing short hill climbs or TTs or something, I'm certainly not doing any hill climbs, don't get any ideas. I think it's a little bit too stiff. And like I said before, with the carbon spoke wheels, am I compromising on tyre pressure? And finally, let's not avoid what I hinted at the beginning. There is a slight whiff of beta about this, and I really, really hope not, because when I got these wheels, they were for sale on the website. They were on a GMBN video of one of the guys riding it down a black run at Forest of Dean, something stupid like that, obviously a paid editorial. In my eyes, that means this product is for sale. I had a massive issue with these wheels, what I thought was a massive issue, and I got really, really hot-headed, and I kind of lambasted the marketing department from Winspace on this. The next thing I know, one of my patrons tells me they've removed them from the website. So I'm like, hang on a minute, is this for sale or not? I can't find them on the website, but they're on a GMBN video or GCN promotion. So what is going on? Is this a beta product? So you know how I get with the beta thing. There was no NDA with this, there was no beta testing contract, it was just here, have some wheels for review, and it's all a bit wishy-washy. Anyway, I got straight onto Winspace and said, what's going on? Because lo and behold, after about a week of riding, the screws which hold the flange onto the hub had started to fall out. I'm shitting you not. And this was literally a week after the CRW wheel saga, where I'd taken those wheels to the Alps and got them out the back of the car, cycling up the climb, and the end caps were clicking, like they were too loose. So I was like, well, fuck it. I'm not riding the CRWs until they're fixed, until Joe sent me the fix, which they duly were. They were absolutely brilliant now, still riding them. And then I thought, well, I'll get the Megas out, continue riding those, continue testing those. I got them out the box after, I've been riding them before that for about a month. And I looked back on some photos on my phone and I'd noticed that, I can't believe I didn't pick this up at the time, but after about a week, according to the photos, the screws had come loose out of the, I think it was one, I can't remember if it was at the drive side or the non-disc, but I put the pictures in here, the drive side or the disc side, but the screws were almost all the way out, and I just couldn't believe it. And I was like, well, what's going on? Because I understand why these screws are here. They have to fix the flange in the kind of axial translation. The torsional degree of freedom is taken by the fact that it's like a square peg in a square hole. The hub body, the aluminium part, actually has basically a square drive which fits inside that. So that deals with the torque. But when these are tensioned up, because of the angle, this flange will always want to go that way. But it is nice to actually have the bolts in. Like, it's not going to come off if the bolts come out because the spoke tension is holding it on. There's a horizontal component of this spoke tension holding it onto the flange, so it can't come off. But so I looked at them and I was like, well, I'll take them out and just see if they're Loctited. Took them out, they weren't Loctited. So I played dumb. I just took a photo and I sent it to the marketing department of Winspace and I was like, can you tell me what's going on here? That was all I said. And they went into full crisis mode. They stripped them off the website. One of the patrons had told me they'd taken them off the website. They no longer had them up for sale. And obviously there was a big internal investigation as to why Peak Torque's hubs were falling apart, or the screws were falling out. And you can put screws in hubs like this. These are T25, I think they're M5s. So T25 socket, they're exactly the same basically as a 6-bolt disc rotor screw, which is T25, M25, but these are countersunk and not button heads. So the screw, there's no screw stretch. It's so short. So if you don't use Loctite, they're probably going to vibrate loose. And I took them out and none of them were Loctited. And I didn't want to go back to Winspace with the preload calc and say, look, here's the critical preload for these screws. You can't achieve that with a T25 multi-tool or something. You need to add Loctite because they are going to vibrate loose. I just didn't say anything. They've been riding them and testing them in China for probably a year before they sent these to me. I know Joe from China Cycling was testing them and developing them for ages before me, and maybe I just got a bad set. Anyway, so a bit of medium strength Loctite, 243, solved that issue, and I've not had a problem since, front and rear wheel. And I think I at one point had my 180 disc rotors on here, and even with the vibration and the extra torque of that, I've never had any of these come loose since. I went back to Winspace and said, look, is this a beta? Are you selling this? And we got there in the end, but they are for sale. It is a finished product. I do believe it was just a one-off because I haven't heard of any other problems in the market or with YouTubers with that problem. But something to watch out for sure. If you do buy these, do check that every, first couple of weeks after your harsh braking and accelerating on the cassette, do check those bolts are in. If they're not, they may have forgotten the Loctite, which is, for the money, a little bit of a sin. But you've got to have control. You've got to know what you're doing. And the other thing that pissed me off is when they were trying to do this investigation into what happened. They should be able to tell me what happened with my wheels because these have all got serial numbers on. I think some of the parts may even have like tiny QR tags. Why could they not tell me if these were Loctited or not? There should be a build control. Every line of the process, you scan it, you enter the serial number, and before this goes out, there should have been a barcode somewhere sellotaped to this or on a label that goes to show that all the QC processes were done, all the screws are torqued up. I mean, I'm not talking automotive levels of production, but any minor production line should have some sort of barcoding process to tick off all the little processes. So I'm not quite sure if this was like one in the corner of the room or a corner of the workshop, but anyway, I'm going to be hopeful on this one because I genuinely believe it was a one-off. But anyway, Peak Torque 10 is the code if you want to get 10% off. If you want to get something very, very special, very, very lightweight with very good aerodynamics and you're not so worried about the ride comfort, this is a really good wheel set. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it wasn't too nerdy and too geeky. Don't forget, flat white t-shirts in the Peak Torque store on peaktorque.com. Patrons do get a discount. All that's on the Patreon page. Cheers, and I'll see you in the next one.